All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the HaskinCast Podcast. I am your host, Scott Haskin, and I am here with another thrilling guest. You know, I've really been fortunate to have some amazing people on the show, and my guest this week is no different. He has been in the education field for a long time. He has seen some things. We're going to talk about all of that and his new book, Larry Strauss. Larry, how are you?
Great. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. I have to give huge props to anybody who is willing to even get into the world of education these days, let alone somebody who's stayed in it so long and worked really specifically in the areas that you have. What was the thing that made you say, yeah, this is what I want to do?
I think I was probably always born to be a teacher. Not born to be a teacher, but from an early age, I think I was I was destined to be good at it. I grew up with a brother with severe cognitive disabilities, and it made me patient and persistent, and it really made me a teacher from a very early age. He was older than me, but I became the older brother in many ways. So I think that, but I never thought about that as a career. I was in my 20s. I was trying to make it as a writer. I wrote for the Transformers first generation cartoons show, and I did some sitcom work, and then I ghost wrote a bunch of books, and I was trying to do my own stuff too, and then I actually had a pretty big movie sale of one of my novels, and I thought, this is it. I've turned the corner. I am a successful writer, and I mean, I happen to have been wrong. The movie never got made, and I never had anything like that. Six-figure advance on anything, even nothing close to that since then. But I mean, at the time, I thought I had this fake existential crisis, this is all there is. Mm-hmm. And so I found myself gravitating to. I'd actually been supplementing my income by tutoring, by doing private tutoring, and I kind of got the idea, maybe I could be a good teacher. And now that I've beat this writing thing, I thought. And and I was wrong about both. I mean, I was really not a very good teacher at first, but I don't think there are too many people who are. It's really, really hard to get good at it. It takes a while. And one of the things I benefited from as a writer and as a teacher is delusion, is my own delusional thinking, thinking I'm better than I am at the moment, so that I don't get too despairing. Sure. Only in retrospect can I go yeah, I wasn't very good then. But by then I was pretty good, or at least I thought. I guess when you're delusional, you never know for sure.
Well, I think we sometimes need to paint that picture to help us carry through those rough interim times.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. It's interesting because that would seem like a very natural progression then for you to take that field. Yeah,
I mean but again, it was a shock. It's a shock, I think, for a lot of people to go actually into a classroom, especially if you've been in a university program that's preparing you for the classroom. That's the worst preparation you can get, because it just doesn't. It doesn't. And even if they do a good job of explaining what it's going to be like, you don't know until you're there in that moment. And so it took a while, but I say, within a few years, I knew that I could get good at it. Then the thing that was upsetting, which I think I see this in a lot of young teachers, is the frustration of knowing you could do so much more and you just don't have time. That's what causes the burnout. Is I think young people who get into teaching because they loved school themselves and they were very successful at it.
Right.
And they're used to getting A's and being great at everything, and they're not great at it. And then they get angry because they start to realize the reason I'm not great at it is it's impossible to do everything I realize can be done for these kids. Like every kid needs, 6 hours of my time a day, or I'm not need, but well, yeah, could benefit from it. And
right.
I only have so much of me to give them. I was just talking to my principal today about, we have for the first time, we have a psychiatric social worker in our school. It's like a revolutionary thing in the inner city to have that. And of course, we've needed it all along. And she happens to be a former student of mine, which I can't tell you how happy that makes me. She was like a great student and just a great person. And for her to be working in our school is very gratifying to see.
Mm-hmm.
But and I've referred numerous students to her who I knew or know are going through, just terrible trauma over, there are things that happen to them, things they've witnessed, things that have happened to their family, particularly during COVID. I mean, and I've learned, as an English teacher and someone who helps students applying to college and writing personal essays, I learn a lot of these things. And, so I've referred a number of students, and I was talking to the principal. I said, it's like we need a psychiatric social worker for half the students, in the school. And we have one. And, I asked her, like, I hope you're not feeling burned out. And she's able to modulate her expectations of what she can do for each of them. But it is overwhelming, and it's overwhelming, for teachers too. So
just the sheer volume of kids that need that kind of assistance is probably you just looking at your schedule and going, wow, I can't breathe.
Yeah. Really, the clever teachers figure out ways to get the students, to help each other too. I mean, if you can do that, if you can get that going so that the pressure is not as much on you, but it doesn't always work.
Right.
Like every group of students, it's kind of like every novel. I remember, I think Dr. O, who wrote Ragtime and many other great novels and stories, he said every book is this. You're a new writer. Every novel, you're a new writer. You have to find your way. It's not, unless you're a formulaic, writer in a genre. If you're trying to write literature, every work is new. I guess for an actor, every character, you have your skill, but you're starting over in a way. And I think that's true with teaching too. Every class of students is unique.
And you have to adapt very quickly to what the needs of the students are. It can't be, this is our curriculum and you're just going to sit there and learn it. If the kids aren't learning, especially in the inner cities where they haven't had maybe the greatest education by the time they've gotten to you, you've really got your work cut out for you on every student you deal with. Yeah.
You absolutely can't. I was having an argument with my assistant principal about, wanting every month me to hand in a plan of what I'm going to do that month. And I said, I know what to do, but I don't always know in advance where things are going to go. I want to respond to the kids. The class isn't going to be the same as it was last year. I'm adapting to, the world has changed. Their world has changed. They're different from the cohort I taught last year. And so, after 30 years, I have a pretty big toolbox and a pretty big library. And, and a lot of times I pull from things I've used before. And sometimes it requires me to pull out something new. I just did that, the other day. Based on this student interest and strengths and weaknesses, I was like, you're going to read that story and I'm going to ask them about this. So, like at a certain level, you have to trust your son. There's an improvisational quality to it also.
I like that though, because that is the kind of thing that you are far more likely to actually reach the kids and inspire them to work hard and learn and turn out to be something, as opposed to the kids that you lose because you have to follow the formula.
Yeah, I feel, and in a lot of schools, teachers don't have that kind of freedom. Certainly new teachers, I think it's harder for them to fight for that kind of freedom. I don't, I don't have a problem fighting about it. I have enough cred that I can get an administrator to back down on those things. But for new teachers, it's unfortunate that they get forced into these, teaching from a textbook that it was written by people who maybe know something about teaching and learning, but but they don't know your kids, they don't know your students, and English textbooks are always just I've never been inspired by them very, very much. I just think, like, first of all, you don't want to read literature out of a giant tome, and you want to read it out. You want to hold a book in your hand and read it, and, like, have a kind of intimate relationship with that, that book that's your book, and not some giant thing with small print on it.
It does make a big difference in the connection that you have with what you're reading. I think you absorb it better. It becomes a more personal experience. You invest in that story more.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, right. And then, I love the luxury. I mean, since so much is available now on the internet, everything that's past its copyright expiration, Shakespeare to, a lot of Hemingway, you can download it and print it out, which it does use a lot of paper, but it enables students to write on it too, which is also, if you're studying it, it is good to be able to annotate a text. So, so unfortunately, in our state, there was a lawsuit many years ago called a girl named Chandra Williams graduated high school. I think it was up in Oakland. She graduated high school, could not read at all, and her family sued. And one of the issues that was brought up in the trial was that she'd had many classes where she was not issued a textbook, and so that became a legal point. Well, she didn't have a textbook. She didn't learn how to read, which is, for an educator, that's nonsense. I mean, if the reason she didn't read it was she was not given anything to read on a piece of paper or in a novel, then yes. But to say it had to be this textbook that was approved by the state, that that it's like that response to the lawsuit is like just so antithetical to teaching and learning. So now every kid in the state in the public school has to have a state-approved textbook in every core class. And while a textbook may make sense in some classes, I don't know. I'm not an expert in those subjects. In English, it's not. It's there are teachers who work well out of a textbook. In college, colleges have that scam where the teacher writes the textbook, and supplements their income. But in in English class, it does not encourage a love of reading to hand somebody a gem. So what happens is a lot of English teachers, a lot of the good English teachers, I mean, they have the textbook, they issue it, and then they kind of ignore it, and millions of dollars get spent for this symbolic thing that's a legal requirement.
Right. And with that money, you could get 2 or 3 more counselors. Exactly. Yeah. I'm kind of curious how you guys ever got the board to approve a counselor in the first place.
I think the last superintendent, I don't always speak kindly of superintendents, but the last superintendent of our school district, I think he was very sympathetic to that issue, among other things. I mean, I have to say, during the pandemic, the superintendent made sure that meals were available to families, not only students. If anyone could go get a meal, because why, like, if they're hungry people in the community, so the school district fed people.
Wow.
And they did a pretty good job of it. And, so I'm not surprised that, he's a smart guy, and he saw like a lot of students are under great stress and distressed and experiencing, especially during the pandemic, there was an enormous amount of stress and trauma. Domestic violence went up. I mean, I remember having a student who family fell apart like the second week we were out of school, and the family became destitute. We had to help them. We raised money so that they didn't end up on the street, and so I think he recognized that, and to his credit, I think it was he was certainly, whether it was his idea or not, I think he certainly was supportive of it. So
I love that.
I mean, that's the good news. I mean, and that is a great improvement. I mean, I hope every school has someone as good as we do. On the downside, people who don't work with kids don't always have the best ideas about how to address what they call social emotional health of students. They'll go, all right, well, let's do some social emotional lessons, or it's not well thought out. It's dealing with social emotional health is something you do every minute of the class. I mean, it's not something you do. It's not a separate thing. It's not an add-on. You're building kids' confidence in themselves.
But I'm sure they Googled the top 3 things that they should do.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But that's the problem is I think people that do want to help don't always know how. And so they try, and, I love the idea of wanting to help, and I love what you guys did at your school. I agree. I hope more people do that, because we really all need to work together to make the world a better place.
I mean, just today I was explaining to the students in my advanced placement literature class why they were going to have to take all these standardized tests this year, because in past years seniors didn't even have to take these tests, and now they're making us give these tests to these kids, which are, in many ways these tests are beneath them. Like, it's not, they're going to take the AP test. They just took the SAT test. Those are difficult tests, which you sure measure them by that. These are more rudimentary tests that are supposed to, they're supposed to identify if we're failing to meet the basic needs of kids educationally. All these kids in this classroom are well past that, but they have to take it anyway because it's a mandate. And I was explaining to them, okay, these things are political. Data is political. And I was giving them a whole talk about, how people in positions of power in various institutions and politicians, they like numbers. They can say that went up 5%, it went down 5%. They like numbers. The real measure of whether we're successful with students it's more abstract, it's more nuanced, and you have to have an imagination. And politics doesn't do well with that stuff. So I was explaining all this to them, and then I said, by the way, last year you guys took a test. You were tested. And I said, you guys knocked it out of the park. Like, you made us look really good. 92% of your class was proficient or advanced in this test, which is, a staggeringly high number for LA period, much less South LA.
Right.
And I said, you made us look like superstars. I said, I don't know how much the teachers could take credit for it or how much of it is you guys, but you guys really, you really did a great job, especially considering, you're stuck at home, crowded home. I mean, just all the obstacles. And I said, only 8% of you, only 8%. I said, I'm sure there's no one in this room right now who's in that 8%. And this girl, sort of half jokingly said, no, I'm sure I'm in the 8%, and I said, no, you're not. And she says, oh yeah, I am. And then we started talking about confidence. And I said, confidence is something you have to work at. And then the other kids were like, yeah, no, I don't have any of that. Like half the room is saying basically, I have no confidence in myself at all. I'm insecure. I work hard because I'm scared not to, but I have no confidence. And then, I talked to them a little bit about what do you do? What do you do if you're not confident? Well, obviously other people can, if you get enough encouragement and praise, that helps. And then I said, sometimes if you pretend you're confident, sometimes that can help. You can start. Sometimes we think we need to get something right internally, and then externally we'll be right. Sometimes it works the opposite. When I started teaching, our school was at risk, almost all at risk students many of whom have been kicked out of other schools, were in the criminal justice system, gang affiliation. And whenever we go on a field trip, we'd make them dress up, make them wear, shirts and ties and slacks or dress, we'd make them dress up. And the idea was if you're externally look a certain way, you're going to act more like that. And it was true. It did work. Mm-hmm. And so I was explaining, and I said, by the way, when I make a phone call, like if I have to call somebody on business and I'm calling a hotel about my reservation, the airline, whatever it is, any call at all about anything, someone in the school district, the first thing when they pick up the phone, I tell them my name, mm-hmm. even though they don't know who I am. I said, but you don't want to call and say, you don't want to stumble around. So you say, hello, this is Larry Strauss. And then I launched into it. I told them that. I said, you tell them your name, because when you tell them your name, you're saying to them, I'm somebody. Yep. You should know who I am. I'm, and they're looking at me like, you can do that? I'm like, yeah, you can do that. You can tell them your name. And if you say that, like they should know who you are, you'll start to feel more like that. But so, there's a social emotional lesson. It wasn't planned. It wasn't a separate add-on. It just kind of came out of the class. And often things like that don't happen with the whole class. They happen individually. They happen between, the teacher and, when I'm consulting with a student, when they're working on something, they ask me a question. Every interaction should be about, helping build their self-esteem, their confidence, and their, and the developing their skills. And really the best way to be confident is to be competent. So, mm-hmm. If we're doing a good job, ultimately that's going to help with their, social emotional health too.
Well, I think one thing that's really been a repeating theme on my show when I talk to different people, whether they're actors or authors or directors, is if you let things breathe, if you let things come out naturally, you'll find those moments. If you try and stick to a curriculum or, too hard to a script, you miss out on some of those magical things that can make the biggest difference. So I love that you do that.
Absolutely. That's a great analogy. That's a great analogy. You have to, like I tell students about, right? You got to have the flow. You got to have the flow. You got to, you have to ultimately impose some order on the flow. And the more experience you get, the easier it is for you to do that while you're writing. But sometimes you just have to go back and, but you don't find things unless you're free. You don't find the best moments unless you're free.
Absolutely true. And it does. Writing is a great example of that too, because if you're too busy editing yourself while you're writing, you're ruining your book. Yeah. As absolutely. You know, because is this your fifth book now?
It's my fifth. Yeah. I mean, I like to sound, I like to say it's my fifth book. It's my fifth published book.
Right.
It's the other 20 languishing in a box, which I may, the interesting thing about that is my fourth novel, Now's the Time. I originally wrote it in the late 80s. and then came back to it in the like around 2007 or 2008, and with a whole new perspective. So yeah, that was an old book that I'd almost given up on, and then I gave it new life, and it became so much better. And the same thing, Lightman, the new one, I'd written this thing in so many different versions, so many different ways. I actually had kind of concluded at one point, this is just not, because it's the most autobiographical thing I've ever written. And, so of course my first versions were when I was very young, and they were, extremely indulgent and, just not really worthy of anyone reading.
I can't say I haven't done that a few times myself.
Yeah,
yeah, I can identify.
But I mean, what's the evolution of? I mean, if I was like a great writer, it would be interesting for me to kind of track the evolution of this book. If I was the kind of writer that people studied, this would be an interesting one because of how the story evolved and the characters evolved. And, it started out with being my family. It was like there was a mother and a father and two sons, and one of them was severely brain damaged. So and the mother's an actress, the father's, it was very close. Excuse me. And then I, switching points of view, and then suddenly, like, the character of the father changed. He became this other guy that is not at all like my father. It's kind of more like what my father might have wished he was, although not in a glamorous way at all. Right. Like my father was the nicest person I ever knew. He was. I mean, people tell me I'm a nice person, and I'm like, no. Like, you should have met my father. Like, I am like 10% as nice, generous, and gracious as he was.
Wow.
And he had no pride at all in that. He wanted to kick people's ass. He wanted to be he wanted to express his anger. He wanted to get in people's faces. He was not that kind of guy. And, but I know he, on some level he wanted to be, although of course he was conflicted about it, because he was deep down a really good person. But
it's tough when you're a person that really does have a good heart and you really want to show some muscle at some point.
Yeah.
Like I've had moments where maybe, as an example, all right, that's it. I've had it with this company. I'm going to let them have it. And I'll call up and I'll get somebody on the phone. And I'm just like, my body is tense and I'm ready to go. And I'll be like, hi, I'm sorry to bother you. I just had a question.
Exactly.
It's so hard to not do that.
Right. Especially, right. You hear the voice of some poor person, like you're angry at some company or something and you're like ready to, rip someone a new one. And then the person on the other end of the phone, it suddenly hits you like, oh yeah, this is a low-wage worker who's working in this company. I cannot let it out on them. But anyway, so the character who became the father character, Mike, is so he's so different, and yet in some ways he's also, my father was a very educated, articulate man. Mike is more crude, and he's smart, but he's he's much rougher around the edges, and he's a light man. Hence the title. My father was a music guy, and that was the character for many drafts of this. But the light man I found much more interesting, and he's but he doesn't really. He's really good technically, and he understands what he's told to do, but like he doesn't really understand the plays. He describes Chekhov as a bunch of Russians drinking tea and getting on each other's nerves, which actually is I mean, that is what you see on the stage, but this is, of course, a lot more to
Sure.
Chekhov's work
Right.
than that. He's kind of a simple guy.
Yeah, I don't think anybody would have been studying that or doing term papers on it if it was just a couple guys sitting around drinking tea, you know.
No.
But I like that you kept the setting authentic to the original because it's set in 1973. So this was obviously the time frame of it was very important to the story.
Yeah. I mean, I think when those were the years when I was in the streets of New York, you know, on my own as a 13, 14, 15-year-old. And it's left an indelible impression on me, you know, the adventure and the uncertainty, the volatility. Of course, it's great preparation for being a high school teacher again, because, you know, I don't, and now after 30 years of being a high school teacher, I mean, my startle impulse, not impulse, what's the word? My startle reaction is almost dulled to nothing. Like, it takes a lot to get me like startled, to get my heart beating. I mean, that actually worries me because, I mean, sometimes I'm worried I don't respect danger, you know, because I've chased guys off the campus who had guns.
Wow. I was going to say, yeah, if there was an imminent threat, like somebody pulls out a gun in class, I would think that some part of you would react to that, but that you just shut that down.
Oh, no, I would react. No, I would react. But I'm just saying, like, I would not, like, that fear, that I mean, it's, in a way, it's good. You don't have to paralyze in fear.
Right.
Because you can act more quickly and decisively. But, a few months ago, my wife and I were out looking for, there's this thing, Buy Nothing, where on Facebook, you're in a particular neighborhood, you offer up things that you want to get rid of, and other people who want those things say, I'll take it, and you leave it outside. It's like a whole network.
Okay.
We've gotten some great stuff. We've given away some stuff. I mean, it's an interesting. Anyway, we were looking. We went to a house to pick up, I don't know, a house plant or something that somebody was giving away, and it was night, and it was a dark street. We couldn't find the address. We were looking around with our phones. We got our GPSs, and like the blue dot is here, and the house is, and nothing makes sense. And we're standing in the middle of the street, and I see three shadows. And I think, like, well, there's only two of us. So, and one of the shadows is behind me, and the moon is behind me. So I'm thinking, if there's a shadow behind me, there's somebody standing behind me.
Right. And
I turn, and there's a guy standing like 2 feet away from us, just staring at us. He looks a little bit mentally ill. And, and I remember, like, I just turned to him, and I did not, it was like, no, my wife, like, jumped, and I just turned, and I just asked him where this address was. It's like, do you know where this is? And he barked at me and ran away.
Huh.
So, anyway, that's long. So this character, I found him much more interesting. And then lo and behold, a minor character from an old draft, a guy who, so Mike is a light man, but he met his wife, who's an actress, when she was doing Chekhov, and they were touring. They were in Poughkeepsie, which is where he grew up, doing the lights there, and they fell in love. He sort of made love to her with one of the theatrical lights. He was like lighting her on the stage, and they got to know each other, and so he goes with her, and he ends up back in New York, but he can't get inside the theater because the union has rules about you have to start out as an apprentice, and you have to work. And anyway, he ends up outside the theater running the spotlights. And, bitter guy who knows he could do that job in there better than those guys. But, the union's keeping him out. And so I had this this character who walks up literally in one of the drafts. I just had this guy walk up on him and, ask him for a cigarette, I think, and start talking to him. Because this guy's got to pass out photo processing coupons at night in the street, and he's bored, and so he starts a conversation with him. And Mike at first, it's like, keep moving, buddy. But then eventually he's kind of lonely too, and so I had a few scenes in this draft of the book with these two guys talking, and then. Anyway, Al became the narrator. That guy, Al, became the narrator of the novel. Like,
wow.
he sort of made his prominence known. Yeah. And so that's why it evolved. This whole thing evolved. And then in one draft, the kids, the younger boy, the one based on me, was the protagonist. And I thought, well, how clever I am, a 5-year-old protagonist. But it wasn't really, it's just, it's really, 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 really hard to make a 5-year-old's point of view interesting enough to carry a novel.
Right.
Maybe a short story, maybe a poem. I mean, I've seen it done brilliantly by other writers, but I'm not for a whole novel. I mean, at least I haven't. Maybe somebody has. I haven't read that book yet, but.
If you're making it a children's story, and I'm thinking of there was a book by Stephen King called The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon, and it was all about this little girl who was lost in the woods and just fascinated with this baseball player. You can do it, I think, if you make it a children's story, not in the way of the book has golden edges and it's got a cartoon picture. I don't mean a children's book that way, but I mean it's where the story is really about the child. I think you can, but boy, it's tricky.
Yeah. And, my thing was like, I thought I had an interesting story to tell because as I say, my brother had these severe disabilities and he was diagnosed autistic, schizophrenic, and epileptic. But I've always felt like those labels are just a little, I mean, I know it's scientific, but they're a little arbitrary. Like it doesn't, like when I used to see my brother with other people who were similarly diagnosed, I always felt like they're all just, suffering in their own way. Like each of these people is unique to their illness, to their disability. Excuse me. And, we're just trying to group them together and make sense out of what we don't entirely understand.
Well, don't you think we do that with everything, though? I mean,
probably,
yes. Terms that are thrown around today, like an anti-vaxxer means that you're against the government. It means you think the earth is flat. Like we put these people into buckets,
true. That's true. That's true. And everyone who's right. The anti-vaxxers started with people. I think a lot of it started with people who had autistic children, and I have to say, on that subject and related to the book too, I had an autistic student who graduated from our school last year, and he was in my class for three years. 3 years in a row. And I mean, he did great. It was a real success story that he got through our school, graduated with honors. He's now at Long Beach State University, which is, not an easy school to get into, and really success story. And I was asked to go to attend his last IEP meeting, which is, where the parents, a teacher, and psychologists, counselors, administrators, everybody gets together and sees that his IEP, which is individual education plan, which every special ed student gets and entitles them to services. And it's very strictly legally, enforced, these things. The special ed laws are no joke. And the administrators know that too. They know they get a lot of trouble if they violate. And so we're in this meeting, and everybody, all the school people think this is going to be a celebration. This is his exiting out meeting. We're going to say, like, look at this, look how far he's come, and now he's going to college. Like, they were thinking like it's just going to be this joyful thing, and everyone's going to be crying with joy, and that's not what happened at all. what happened was the mother started lashing out at everybody for not taking care of her son, for not meeting those requirements. And people started getting defensive. I mean, and rightly so. She was making accusations that were just not true, but after a while I started texting my administrator. It's like, do you understand what's going on here? This woman is terrified. This school is the only good thing that ever happened to her son. I mean, he was bullied, he was ostracized, alienated his whole life.
Yeah.
Had no friends until he got to our school. And she's terrified. He's leaving us now. This is the only, place where he's felt comfortable outside of his family. And he has to go out in the world. She's terrified. He has to go be an adult. She doesn't think he's ready. You think he's ready because he's ready to leave you, but he's not going to be your responsibility anymore. Yeah. She is. And so she's acting irrationally because she's alone. She knows she's alone. And I think, like what happened to my parents in the 50s, being, having a child like that, nobody's there for you. And now, of course, there's much more. There's now you get an IEP and you get all these services. But you know what? I think this boy's mother felt a lot like how my parents felt and how other people with children like that feel. It's the worst thing. You feel powerless and feel so bad that your child has to struggle and suffer in the world. And so to me, to lash out at childhood vaccines is entirely understandable. Mm-hmm. To lash out at anyone and anything is understandable. It's not a rational thing. And I don't know, Mike, maybe if we did a better job of making people with children like this, deal with it and feel like, you're part of a community, and your child is my child too. Your child, they're our children. It's not like you have a child who's struggling and look at everyone else's child that seems perfect to you. I mean, my mother used to absolutely, she confessed. I mean, it's one of her, something she's ashamed of, but proud to admit, was how angry she felt at normal children when my brother was suffering the most. Right. My mother did a season on Sesame Street.
I didn't know that.
And she played Molly the letter carrier. Huh. And she said, it was really hard for her because those kids were so sweet. She really loved working with them. But at the same time, it was like they were sticking knives in her with their bright precociousness. And, it was just hard. It was hard because it's her son, and it's just so painful. And I tried to put that feeling into, these two characters in the novel, Mike and Arlene, are the parents. And Arlene is an actress who is able, she's able to put her angst, her rage, her shame, and everything, all that torture chamber of emotion into an audition. She takes a cattle call audition for an insecticide, and she lets it all out of imaginary roaches in the audition. And she not only gets hired, she becomes a folk hero in New York.
I like
that because she's saying what everyone's feeling. The city's overrun with garbage and pestilence, and she's, it's not just like, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore, like in Network. It's not just, it's more complex than that.
Yeah.
It's I'm suffering and I want to get through this, and and I don't know what to do. And, it's that overwhelmed feeling.
Well, I think the important thing that people should really take away from this story, that you told about the lady with the college, is that you paid enough attention to care about what she was really saying instead of just taking her words and going, well, she's just pissed off or she's a bitch or whatever.
Right.
You identified the truth behind what was happening.
Yeah.
I think that's what we're missing in this world. I think people just immediately judge and react, and they don't step back and take a moment and really think.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. And that goes for just all of our divisions. That there a lot of the anger. People watch these videos of angry people doing inappropriate, absurdly immature things, and it's like it's like stopping to look at a car accident. Oh, look, that guy's head is over there, his body's over there. It's just something. There's something a little, it's lazy. It's emotionally lazy. It's easy to just feel contempt and superiority toward people who act that way. And I'm guilty of it too.
Well, I mean, we all.
It's easy, right? It's easy to do, and it's just on some level it's satisfying. Although ultimately it's very empty. But yeah, can we dig a little deeper?
Yeah.
And say, they're people, and something has happened to them.
Well, what's really sad is look at the number of hits those videos get.
Yeah. It's just. Yeah, I mean, it's no different than, watching somebody, fall off a skateboard, and which I watched too. It was dumbest stuff on wheels. I mean, there is something.
There's a difference between people doing something stupid and people who are going through something and being laughed at.
That's true. Right. If you're just like, young and you think you're invincible and you got to learn that lesson. Right. But if you're losing it, and I've seen that. I've seen it in my school. I've seen teachers flip, like completely flip.
Oh, sure.
We had a teacher taken out of the school in handcuffs one day.
Wow.
And there's no joy in it. I mean, aside from just the trauma of what the students had to go through, seeing that, it's sad. It's sad. I mean, they were once, productive, competent people, and something happened to them. And we all need to be humble about the fact that, my mother used to say, there, but for the grace of God, go I, whether you believe in God or not. It's, it could be you, it could be me. None of us is immune to, when stuff happens, when something, when we're struck by whatever it is, bad luck, or, maybe one bad judgment,
And that's all it takes to set you on a path.
Yeah.
Especially if you couple it with, like you were saying in earlier in our conversation, lacking the confidence. There's reasons that people became factory workers and, house cleaners because they didn't believe in themselves. And I say that in general. I know there's people that just fell into that kind of work or loved that work. Yeah. But I think the majority of the people that did work like that or do, simple office jobs today, you just fall into it because you don't push, you don't think you can, you don't believe in yourself.
Right. And then also just poverty is just hard to get out of. I've seen students who just, they end up dropping out of college because of money, because they're not, I think it's easy to get the misimpression that if someone in poverty is a great student and gets into college, that they're going to get a scholarship. But while that happens, and it happens every year to a number of my students, it doesn't happen to all of them. True. There just isn't enough, or and every school has its students, and some of them just don't make it. So I think we have to respect that. But you're talking about going down, one mistake or one stroke of bad luck. I mean, in a sense, in the book, the character Mike, it's what happens to him. He gets dealt a hand. He doesn't know what to do about his son. He is emotionally unprepared for. All he knows is it's his job to fix him. And this is a guy who can, he's not only brilliant at doing theater lights, he can fix your toaster, he can fix your broken TV. This back in the 70s, people didn't always just throw things out and replace them.
Yeah.
People repaired things, and he fixes everything for everyone in his building. It's his little side business, but he can't fix his broken son.
Yeah.
And he ultimately does lash out about it, and his friend Al has to try to bring him back from the edge. But I ended up getting into, this was all new in this draft. I ended up getting into the whole idea, the whole conspiracy idea too.
Well, I have to think that, there's a reason that the book didn't feel right to you, but there was enough substance in it that you didn't let it go either.
Yeah, no, I knew it was an interesting story. I just, I guess because it's autobiographical, I think that's always dangerous. Maybe not always. Maybe for some people it's not the dangerous thing. For me, it always has been. It's just hard not to be indulgent and to have perspective. And of course, I'm old enough now that I hopefully have enough perspective that I know what's interesting about my story and what's maybe interesting to me, but not so much to someone who hasn't lived my story or doesn't know me. And so, there was an essence there that I knew was interesting. I mean, the relationship, as I described, between the two brothers. I had this older brother who had this diagnosis. Everybody was telling, giving my parents sympathy, and they were also encouraged to institutionalize him at a very young age. Excuse me, but refused to do it. But my perspective as a small child was, I thought he was special. I mean, in a good way.
Right.
Yeah. I wanted to be like him.
Mm-hmm.
I thought he was, amazing. I thought he'd come from another planet or something, and he could talk to a clock on the wall, and he seemed to hear things that the clock was saying. I couldn't hear anything from the clock. I didn't see magical things when I looked at a glass of colored liquid.
Was he born that way, or did something happen along the way?
Well, it's interesting you asked me that. I mean, as far as I know, he was born that way.
Okay.
But I don't know. I mean, my parents both passed on, so if there's a secret thing that happened, I will never know. My brothers passed away too, but I assume that they would have told me if there was something.
Right. The reason that I ask, and I hope that I'm not opening a big can of worms here, but it seems like, we as people, we look at somebody who is, born autistic or something like that, and people tend to feel sorry for those kinds of people because they don't get to experience life the way we do. But maybe we don't get to experience life the way they do. They don't know necessarily what they're missing or what they have that we don't have. I think it's kind of judged in a way that we shouldn't be feeling sorry for people necessarily.
Right. Not necessarily. I mean, it's true. We don't know what their experience is. I mean, I did always feel like, but I always felt bad when, I got to do things that my brother didn't get to do. And, and we always sensed that he knew on some level that he was smart in some ways that we didn't entirely understand, but he certainly did. I mean, maybe in the moments where he was present, maybe it was hard for him, but but he wasn't present all the time. He was in his own world of colors and sounds, and he's, we don't know if he had hallucinations or not, but he, in those moments, he didn't know what he was missing. That's probably true.
Yeah. Well, I know that we're a little bit over time, but if you don't mind, I think I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about your mom. For those of you guys who are listening and don't know already, Larry's mom was Charlotte Ray, who played on The Facts of Life in Different Strokes as Mrs. Garrett. She raised a lot of children through television, gave comfort to a lot of people who probably didn't have as much direction. That the fact that there's somebody out there who had a lot of wisdom and shared it, and I think we all benefited from that.
I got an email from a man in New York who told me that an episode about prom drinking and drinking at proms, that because of that episode he did not get in a car after his prom, that ended up crashing and everyone died. So
wow,
he said the show saved his life. And and I know that obviously my mother didn't write the show. She did push for issues. She did want the show to be what it was. To be a place where teenagers could get some solace. So
yeah,
I know she was very proud of that. As far as her acting work goes, there were other things that she was much more proud of that were more challenging. Well, what was challenging about doing a show like Different Strokes, Facts of Life is you have a week to do the show. You have to learn the script. You get rewrites. I mean, it's a crazy grind. Yeah, it is. When you see actors on on a show, that they are working very hard. In fact, I read a really good critique of one of the police dramas. I think it might have been like NYPD Blue or something, in which they said like the kind of the chaotic pace of the police work. It's really just like they're really writing about their own show. It's really this meta thing about they had a crime story, but it's really about doing a show,
right?
Like this crazy grind, that they go through.
Yeah, well, I love the fact that you kind of went in the direction of her character, where you're doing the same thing that her character as Mrs. Garrett did. Just being there for people, helping them, trying to work towards a better life. And the people that do what you do are the people that I love in this world the most. I love creative people, but I love the people that just want to make the world a better place, whether it's one person at a time or 30 children at a time or whatever. We need people to do what you do. So thank you very much, because a lot of lives are certainly better because of what you've put in.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that. By the way, on a humorous note, the teacher in the classroom right next to mine, and our doors are literally right next to each other. She's a new teacher, and excuse me, her last name starts with a G. Mm-hmm. It's not a long name, but for some reason she has Miss G on her door. Which every time I see that, I think, like, God, there's so much my mother missed that she would have appreciated.
Oh, absolutely.
She stuck around just a few more years.
Yeah.
I'm teaching next to Miss G.
I wish I had had the chance to interview her. Unfortunately, she had already passed before I met Harlan. So I didn't get the opportunity, but I'm sure she would have been absolutely wonderful to speak with, as you have been. I've really enjoyed this. Thank you so much, Larry.
Thank you. I have too.
And I wish you the best with the book Light Man. I've got the links in the show notes. Guys, check it out. I think it's going to be a story well worth reading. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Larry, and best of luck to you, my friend.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.
Great talking.
We'll talk again. Bye-bye.
Bye.
There are just some people when you meet them that you know right away they're a good person, that they put a lot of positive energy into this world. And our guest today, Larry, is definitely one of those people. Thank you so much, Larry, for coming on the show. I really did have such a good time talking to you. I think we covered a lot of very important ground, and I have great respect for the work that you're doing. It's not something I could do. I do not have the patience for that kind of work, but I'm glad there are people like you out there that do. Thank you guys for joining me for another episode of the HaskinCast Podcast. We'll be back next week with another episode. In the meantime, take care of yourselves. All right, cheers.